assuming that you've kind of gotten this far in setting up and starting to consume some of that data from an admin experience, you can start to expose this to the end users, the employees, guests of the spaces, things like that. So here I've entered the Space Experience app. One thing to note here right off the bat, there are two different deployment methods here. On one side, you've got the webex devices. So we have that native integration using APIs and configurations available to us through Control Hub and the X APIs, controlling those devices, so configuring certain things on the devices, such as the digital signage URL. So we predominantly use the digital signage mode of those WebEx devices, which is really great for those touchscreen devices, say a Desk Pro, Board Pro, Gen 2 as well. So the more advanced touchscreen or higher tier devices there will have more processing power and everything for those built-in browsers to render our digital signage application, right? So like our end result is something like this web app that's embedded on that board. And the only reason I mentioned that it's a web app because for all intents and purposes, like this ends up as like a kiosk in the lobby, right? It's not an end user application that somebody pulls up in their desktop. This is meant to be embedded in a kind of a headless browser, so to speak, on some sort of device. It could be a TV screen, a static display. It could be an interactive board like the WebEx or some third-party devices. Right? If you're going to go the third-party route, though, like even though we have that functionality here with the non-WebEx devices option, so it's not using those kind of native non-URL methods that we have available to us through the WebEx integration. But this is more of a DIY approach, and so we've worked with a lot of customers where they've got those employee experience folks, or often heard them referred to as kind of smart hands. So people that are well versed in deploying digital signage and kiosks and things like that throughout their spaces. So they're usually very capable and understanding of a lot of the prerequisites to deploy these type of applications. Right? Some of the technologies that they might be used to working with are things like AppSpace, bright sign players, and other. You might hear a lot of other types of terms. So we're continuing to explore, what other direct integrations we can do with hardware there beyond just the WebEx to make a lot more of this seamless, scalable, monitored end-to-end, et cetera. But at a high level, these are kind of the two routes that you can go there. You're going to start with URL, right? It is a web application. This is a more generic URL. You can think of this as kind of a two-step verification process in some respect. It's very similar to, say, logging into like an Apple TV or Roku or something like that with your TV provider. Right? If you're familiar with that process, you say you want to set up the application and you scan a URL on your phone and you log into your TV provider on your phone or your desktop, and then it authenticates that TV. I never entered my credentials into that website, right, or into that media player. So it's a similar sort of concept here. So click on this, or you can highlight and copy that unique URL. So this is unique per Cisco Spaces tenant. And now when I load that, you can see that the unique URL has gone away, and I've got this more generic signage, this display code. And you'll see this URL, just because I'm demoing this in the browser here, change intermittently as we go through this process a little bit. But immediately, the highlight here, the important piece is we've got an activation code. So a combination of originally that unique URL with that text string in it, and this 4-digit code now we're able to identify, okay, this is like, in this case, this is Dean's browser. Um, and I want to lock this signage deployment to that device. I can't open that URL, that tenant URL on another device and get the exact same view without going through the setup process. So on every device, every unique, so like we use local storage in the browser or like an app that has built-in browser or local storage. We use the local storage to store the credentials and so that end users can't get access to this application from anywhere. So I'm gonna pick where we're gonna deploy this. I'm gonna pick our San Jose 10 floor. And important thing to note here in this step, so this is kind of like the pre-configuration. You're just picking where this actual like, physical kiosk is going to be. I might pick the first floor here. This is really important to pick the floor if you want to add a where am I. That's important for things later or in the future you want to set up wayfinding, things like that. You need a where am I on the floor in order to get paths drawn. Like we need to know the origin point and where this device is located. So if you pick the building level, sometimes people don't drill all the way down into the floor, then you won't be able to place that where am I. So I'll just choose that first floor. And now you can see it's asking for that activation code. So it's 8207. And I'll just say, my computer here, so that if another admin comes in here, they don't see some random signage created and wondering which device this is. If there's some things you could do here for better scalability and communication and troubleshooting, such as if I have that TV device and I want to put like the last 6 of the MAC address or something like that, that might make it easier to sort through 100 kiosks listed in this application and figure out which one is which rather than like a long description. And then I can also expand this section and always, so I could skip that step that I did previously where I fetched the URL. I can just come in through here and streamline this, just your steps overall. All right, so I've hit done there. If I actually go back here, you can see that 4-digit code has disappeared on here, and you can see that URL has changed slightly. So things are happening in the back end here that as the admin interface is communicating with that front end and updating there. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to, so one thing that helps to if you're drilled into a specific location in the hierarchy, you might not see all of those signages listed out here. There might also be multiple pages. So if you're not seeing it immediately, you can move around in the hierarchy. I usually like to use the top level, but again, if you have hundreds, it might be easier to drill into those actual locations. So Dean's computer. You can see it's in the not configured state. I can go into that configure. So here you start to really get into the nitty-gritty details of each individual signage. And so you got the interactive versus non-interactive. Again, you can have a TV, static TV display, maybe outside of an elevator lobby or like in the San Francisco office, we have some in some of the stair landing areas that are even, as I'll go through, oriented in a very particular direction, to give you context throughout the floor of exactly where you are and what's available. And then you can also choose like building or floor views. So today, one of the limitations of a floor only view, like this is really just meant for those kind of static displays where you want to list that floor right off the bat or show that floor right off the bat. The limitation though is that it's locked to that floor. Like it's not really intended to use like flipping back and forth between floors. So definitely recommend building if you want to be able to choose floors from the drop down. So I'm going to choose again that San Jose 10. Right, this is slightly different from that step before, or that pre-configuration where we chose that floor in order to get the where am I later. I'll show why that's important. But here you're saying I want to select this whole building, want it to be available. Sometimes when you do the floor, if we don't have the latitude and longitude for those floors, you might have to manually input those. So you can grab typically some kind of generic latitude and longitude from Google Maps, kind of the center of the building, or something you want to be the center there. The first time you go through this setup, we'll have images in this device. We haven't configured the signage yet, so we don't have your actual live signage. But as you come in here in subsequent updates, changing settings, we will have the currently live deployed signage embedded in the web page. Step 2, you can turn on and off the widgets. So just referring to this sample image on the side here, being able to turn on and off like occupancy of the building and the floors if you want to. I think most people just end up leaving those turned on. Helps give a sense of like which floors or which times of the day are busier than others. Indoor air quality, temperature units, things like that. Points of interest are there's like a legend in the bottom right of the floor view that has some of those highlight like restrooms, stairs, elevators. You can highlight those on the map, so you can turn that off if you want to, for whatever reason. Okay, so now we really get into the interesting steps where you can actually position the floor in the view. Some of this takes like a little bit of experimentation and playing around with these settings, but you can manually edit these, or you can hold down the control key and click and drag up, down, left, right to rotate and change the pitch and everything. So, people can spend a lot of time really dialing this in however they want. If you take note of these numbers and come back in here for the next signage and you want the exact same view, you can type those in, plug them in, and get the exact same view for every signage. So that's a nice little helpful tip. So yeah, and as you kind of change everything, you might want to come back in here a second time just to dial things in. Okay, so referring back to like choosing that floor previously in that pre-configuration step, you definitely need to do that before being able to configure the where am I on here. So by default, we'll check that enable where am I for you. You could technically toggle that off and hide it too, but you can use the buttons on the left to change the position. Now you notice I'm hitting the right arrow, but it's going down. This takes a little bit of experimentation too, where if you recall from the last step, I rotated the map. So just calling out that this is in relation to that original orientation. So now you can see I'm going right here, and I can rotate, get that in the lobby, for example. So again, try to refine some of these. It's a little like translating, uh, reorienting directions and things like that. And then the last step here is to review and publish. So again, we haven't published that live view yet, so it's still the sample image, but the next time that you come in here, it will be ready. Just calling out to that we're working on getting this to be the live view of what you just configured, but it's going to show you actually what is live out there on the signage before you publish. The publish will update it, and so that can be a little confusing. You'd expect to like preview this before actually making the change to the actual display, but we'll refine that. So yeah, publish. And then you see behind the scenes, this page is actually reloading and now this version of the signage is locked to show frame up here. It's locked to this device. Important again to note that this uses local storage. So if you have some kind of setting or something on a device that periodically clears the local storage, or a device reboot or something wipes out in memory, local storage, cookies, etc., then you're going to run into some issues here where you're going to have to reconfigure that signage. So it's important, again, working with those employee experience sort of smart hands in companies, uh, to make sure that these devices are configured properly to receive this data.